Today, we're going to break down a story that's just incredibly complex. It's got Hollywood history, a truly shocking family tragedy, and a political reaction that set off a firestorm. Let's get into what happened to the director, Rob Reiner.
So, it all started with this headline. And honestly, it was a shocker. The legendary director Rob Reiner and his wife Michele were found murdered in their Los Angeles home. Just a brutal, sudden end to a very celebrated life.
Now, to really understand the scale of this loss, we first have to talk about who Rob Reiner was. I mean, his death wasn't just another news item. It was the loss of a genuine cultural icon. Just look at this list. His work is part of our collective memory. He pretty much defined the modern romantic comedy with When Harry Met Sally and gave us timeless classics like The Princess Bride and Stand By Me. His movies really did shape a generation's experience. But the reality of how his life ended is incredibly grim. He and his wife were found stabbed to death inside their home in Brentwood. Some of the first reports even mentioned their throats had been slit, which paints this picture of a really violent, personal, and horrifying attack. And then, as if the story wasn't shocking enough, it took an even darker turn. Investigators, well, they didn't have to look very far for a person of interest. Their focus turned right back inside the family home. Police arrested their son, Nick Reiner, as the #1 suspect in both murders. The idea that a son is suspected of killing his own parents, it's just a shocking, terrible development. He's since been arrested, and he's being held on $4 million bail. A number like that really underscores just how severe the charges are that he's facing. Now, Nick's personal struggles weren't a complete secret. He'd actually directed a film called Being Charlie, which was based on his own life, and it went into his battles with drug addiction and times when he was homeless. This just adds another really tragic and complicated layer to this whole situation. But just as the public was trying to process this awful family tragedy, the entire narrative got hijacked. A very controversial political response suddenly came out and completely changed the conversation. Former President Donald Trump posted this statement on his platform, Truth Social. He starts by calling Reiner's death a very sad thing, but then he connects it to what he calls an incurable affliction, a mind-crippling disease known as Trump Derangement Syndrome, all in caps. He was basically suggesting that Reiner's own politics played a role before finishing with, "May Rob and Michele rest in peace."
So you might be wondering, what exactly is Trump Derangement Syndrome? Well, it's a term, and it's definitely a negative one, used by Trump's supporters to describe what they believe is obsessive, irrational criticism of him from people who oppose him. So in this case, Trump seems to be suggesting Reiner's own political views were somehow a factor in his death.
As you can imagine, that post immediately created a huge split in the public reaction. It drew this really sharp line between how most people were responding and this very specific, very political angle that the former president threw into the mix.
And that divide was just stark. On one side, you had this widespread reaction of mourning. People were focused on the artist, on his movies, his legacy, regardless of politics. And then on the other side, you had Trump's response, which completely reframed the whole tragedy around a political condition and really centered his own presidency in the story. Now, this is a really crucial point. This was not a simple left versus right fight. Many prominent conservative figures actually came out and publicly condemned Trump's post. They called it inappropriate, which really isolated his response from the mainstream. This also brings up a pretty interesting inconsistency. When Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was a political opponent of his, passed away, Trump's public statement was, quote, "She was an amazing woman who led an amazing life." That's a very, very different tone from the highly personal and critical post he made about Reiner. Beyond all the political noise and the back and forth, it is so important to come back to the heart of this story, which is just the immense personal tragedy for the Reiner family. The details are just heartbreaking. It was the couple's daughter, Romy Reiner, who discovered her parents' bodies, and she reportedly told the police, right there at the scene, that she believed a very dangerous family member was the one responsible, which pointed the investigation inward right from the very beginning. So let's just pause for a second and really think about what this means for that family. Two parents are murdered. Their own brother is the main suspect. And now two surviving children are left to somehow figure out how to navigate this unimaginable aftermath, all while it's playing out as a public spectacle. This whole incident really leaves us with a very tough question, especially for the times we live in.
In an era that is this politically divided, where exactly do we draw the line between personal grief for a family and public political commentary?